I pulled out a couple of my books. The Les Paul Legacy, Volume 1. There's a Volume 2. This one goes up to guitars made between 52 and 63. I have the Gibson Les Paul book, which is an excellent source of finding out exactly what came on which model in what year. And of course, you can't talk about Les Paul books if you don't talk about the one that Les did, his autobiography, Les Paul in His Own Words. Great book. So let's get right to it. The first thing, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody. In 1952, when they made the first Les Pauls, they retailed for $210. Now, if you're like me, you complain a lot about the price of Les Pauls these days, how high they are. But if you take $210 and work it out in 2019 dollars, that still comes to $2,014. So a Les Paul guitar in 1952 would still have cost you the equivalent of $2,014. So I think I'll stop complaining about the price. The second question is, I often wondered, how much money did Les actually make off the guitars for his endorsement? Well, it turns out that the deal he worked out with Gibson was for 5% of the wholesale price. He got 5% of the wholesale price of Les Paul guitars, which, if you think of the millions of Les Pauls that have been made, is a pretty good deal, right? So that's another one. This is a good one. Of course, we know that, well, we know if you read about it, that Les didn't exactly design the Les Paul guitar as far as the body, the shape of the body. He had a lot of input into it, but the original design came from Ted McCarty, who was one of the bigger people at Gibson at the time, and he designed the body shape. Les then wanted the top contoured. That was kind of what he brought to the table. And he introduced the first tailpiece, which was the what they call the trapeze tailpiece, which didn't last. They ended up pulling it off in the very next year, in late '53. So Les didn't design the Les Paul guitar. He had a hand in designing the Les Paul guitar. Now, when Les Paul guitars first came out, they had single pickup P90s. You've seen pictures of them, I'm sure. And Gibson actually still makes gold tops with P90s. They are single coil pickups. The first humbucker pickup didn't come along until 1955, and that was developed by a guy named Seth Lover. Now, Seth Lover created what they called the PAF, the humbucker pickup, in 1955. It's called the PAF, patented applied for. And they put a sticker on the back of the original patent applied fors that just said PAF. So that's, well, now actually it said patent applied for on the back. It was a sticker, okay? And that was on there until partway through 1958, because that's how long it took before Gibson got the okay from the patent office that their patent had been accepted. So it was sometime during 1958. They didn't have to put the sticker on there anymore. It's said in some of the things I read that if you have a original PAF with the sticker on it, it's probably worth about $1,000 to collectors who want to put a real PAF, let's say in a 58 or 59 burst that's been switched out over the years. So if you find one of those by chance, it's worth a lot of money. One of the things I found interesting. I don't know if you've heard this before, but I have heard it. Some people have said that when they made the PAF pickups in the 50s, at one point in 58 and 59, some of the pickups were dual colored. The cream, what we call the zebras now, the cream color and the black. And I've read in other things and heard people say that those are worth more money because the people think that the cream colored one is had a different winding than the black ones, and that those pickups are different and more valuable than a regular PAF. I have a quote here from Seth Lover himself in this book, and I'll read it to you as soon as I find the place that I marked it. It's either in this book or in this book, probably this one. And here we go. In answer to that question, Seth Lover said, for instance, the original coil forms on Les Pauls are made of black Kennick, whatever Kennick is, and the people who were molding them ran out of black material. So they asked us if they could make some out of cream, and it didn't matter or seem to make a difference to us because they were all covered up, because they had the nickel covers on the pickups. So they didn't care what the color was beneath it. The reason they didn't like to do the cream was because the molders don't like to run cream. It means they have to clean their machines each time because there's always some black residue left in there. So the first coils that came out were kind of cloudy and mixed, with some black material. So they don't like to change back and forth, but in order to keep us going, why not run the coils and make them out of cream? Then he's asked if it made a difference. He said, well, it happened several times through the years. Actually, the myth got started about them being better. The myth got started that the cream ones sounded better than the black ones, but I can tell you they're exactly the same. So the cream pickups are on the original PAFs and through the years are no different than the black ones. It's just the color of the bobbin that they made the pickup out of, and all the parts of it. That's it. All right. One last thing, and this is the one I like most of all, I think. And that's that the reason that they stopped making Les Pauls in the early 60s, 1960, 61 to be exact. They stopped making Les Pauls. It's always been said they stopped making them because they didn't sell well, and Gibson wanted to change the style of the Les Paul into the SG model. That's true. That's exactly right. The 58, 59, and 60 Les Pauls didn't sell well, which is one of the things that makes them so rare. There's so few of them. But then it was said that you'll have people say that Les didn't like the SG. So the first year that they released the SGs in 61, they had Les's name on it. They were called Les Paul guitars, the Les Paul SG. And it said that Les Paul had his name taken off because he didn't like the guitar. And that's why his name was left off. That's not exactly true. Rather than quote it, I'll tell you, you can find it in this book, and there's a brief blurb on it in Les's own book. At the time that the SG was coming out, he was getting divorced from his wife Mary Ford. and his contract was a 10-year contract with Gibson, which would have been up in 1962. He signed for the contract in 1952. 10 years, 1962, he'd have to re-sign. He didn't want to re-sign the contract until after his divorce, because any endorsement deal he did would become part of the marital assets, and he didn't want to re-sign with Gibson at that time until his divorce was finalized. He wasn't crazy about the SG, but he didn't hate it. And he mentions in his own book that it was one of his biggest mistakes ever to ask that his name be taken off it, because Gibson never put his name back on it, and he lost out on all those sales of the SG guitar over the years. And he says it's one of the biggest business mistakes he ever made. So that's just a few things about Les Paul and Les Paul guitars, and just thought I'd pass that on. So enjoy. Hope everything's good with you. Bye.